Hi, it's Kevin Sharp, and today I'm joined by a well known name on Comic Art Live, Jimmy Palmiotti, to talk about a page from Marvel's Conan series. Jimmy, thanks for joining us, and tell us about what you chose.
All right, Kevin, how you doing, man? So I chose a book that when I was 12 years old came out. So it has a lot to do with picture my 12-year-old brain and where it's at in the world. And it's Conan number 24, written by Roy Thomas and drawn by Barry Windsor Smith. Sorry, did the art on the cover and on the inside of the book. It is the first appearance of Red Sonja, and I think it's is it the first? Yeah, I think it's the first full appearance because I think she was on one page the issue before on 23, but this is the one where it's like considered her first full appearance. And I was a huge fan of a couple of things at the same time, right? I was a huge fan of Conan, and I was not the superhero guy growing up. I liked Superman and I liked Batman, but they were not like. But if I had like an action comic like Conan or science fiction or horror, I kind of like that stuff more than the superheroes. It might explain a lot of my career as I'm saying it because I've always been like I loved Jonah Hex at the time, and there was so many alternative comics that I liked, including undergrounds. I was going to head shops when I was a little kid and picking up the Corbin books, and all that stuff. But when Conan came out, I was buying it regular. And the crazy thing about the artwork by Barry Smith was every issue was getting a little better. Like it started out looking like Kirby, and I think that's he right before it he did a couple of X-Men issues and some fill-ins, some other books, and he looked like a Kirby ripoff when he started. And then as Conan started coming out, it was inked by different people, so it looked a little different each time. But this is where Barry actually inks himself. And in issue 24, we have a full story with Conan and Red Sonja. And this page we're talking about, basically, this is the story of this is it's right after they're walking in, like it's right after a bar fight, you know, and they kind of started over one guy grabbing Sonya while she was dancing on the table, and then it turned into a brawl. And while the brawl is happening, you see it in the first panel. They're still fighting inside while Conan and Sonya kind of slipping out the side door, and they're kind of flirting here. They're kind of communicating. They're getting to know each other. We both established that they're both fighters, and now they're having a quiet moment. And they're both sweaty from the fight. Um, and then they both die. They see I guess a pool of these beautiful fountains by this ornate looking palace, and they both dive in for the cool off. And of course, Sonya, starting trouble, takes off her chainmail shirt and holds it up like check it out. And then Conan is like the last panel. He's like hypnotized. And so there's so much to love about this book. I mean, just the first panel where they're leaving the fight. It's just the lighting. They're walking into another place, which is great. Like we're showing a transition panel. So we have the cut in the wall, and then leaving one place, going to another. We have the flirtation where Sonya's kind of looking at Conan with her eyes wide open, like there's every indication she's having a great time. And Conan's kind of being his usual brooding self a little bit, which obviously she digs. And then the next panel, we pull the camera back and we do a nice establishing shot of the place they are, which is these beautiful palaces and gardens. There's even a peacock to the right, which is just to show how affluent, the area they are. Like it's almost like a marbleized ground, and there's marble everywhere, and it's these shiny streets. And then, I love the fact also that Conan is still holding on to his bottles of wine. Like he just won't let that stuff go. He walks out of the bar. He's like, as much as he's enjoying this, he is not letting that drink go. And when they both dive into the water, obviously he goes in the other way because he's trying to protect his drinks. But as reality happens, he loses. By the time we get to the fifth panel, he loses it and sees her. He's looking underwater and her diving in and looking at her, obviously admiring her. And then the next panel, she pops up with a shirt in her hand, and that's it. It's so 12-year-old boy. This is like the hormones are going for this page. there's so much. It's pretty to look at. When it was in color, it's just beautifully colored, and it had so much going for it. And texture wise, I mean, it was something you didn't see. Where in superheroes, there's usually shortcuts with rendering hair and stuff. And I was drawing as a kid, and you look at that second panel, you see every hair of Conan, every hair of Sonya, which is something you don't see rendered a lot in comics. And then if you look closer at Sonya's hair above her eyes, it's like fantastically rendered. He actually gets abstract. They look like almost like fish swimming. The lines. It's like there's a line and a dot. So he's actually doing this technique in turn of the century black and white work where it's like it's kind of like it goes beyond just what it is. He's actually creating this very fluid looking line, and again we go to the next panel, and he's rendering all the trees and all the feathers in the peacock and all the buildings in the background, and then her chainmail, everything on the chainmail up into where it's catching light, and which is Barry is great at. Um, and important to him, of course, the sword handles are lovingly rendered. They Sonya's in the second panel. It's even got a little shine on it, at the end of it. There's a lot of phallic shit going on in this second panel, with the wine. There's a lot of stuff going on in this page.
I was going to ask you, as an aspiring artist, when you're reading this, is this inspiring to you, or is this like looking at the Sistine Chapel where you just say it's beyond what I can do?
No, so the artist in me looks at it and takes it apart with my eyes. I'm trying to see how he did it and why he did certain things. Like the fifth panel, when she dives into the water, there's movement with the water behind her feet. But also, Barry chooses to not let the coloring do it, but he makes the water black above. So he realizes when we're looking up, it's not light we're seeing, it's actually night, and it's a night sky. So he went black with the water. There's like choices he made, and then when she pops out of the water, he kind of leaves it to the coloring. He doesn't need to render the bushes around there, but he wants you to know they're in a private area now, right? He doesn't want. We don't see the buildings anymore. We don't see windows. We see bushes and trees, and that's to give us the sense that we're in a private area. Now, if we go to the next page, I'm cheating by giving you guys 2 pages a little bit, but it's a scene. So now we're in the page where we see Conan. He has his back to her, and she holds up the chainmail, like, so we don't see her breasts, right? But we know what's going on there, and she's playing she's playing oblivious, which I don't believe. After that look in the second panel, but she's like, oh, she kind of renders it, and even though by the third panel, she says there's no time for this. She's giving him a look, and then he's got her hands almost around her, like she could have backed away in this scene, but they're attracted to each other. It's just that now we have panel one. Now we have a building in the background. So now they're in a public area. So they're out of their fantasy world they were in for the last 3 panels, and now they're in a public place with its only buildings and some trees behind them. And there's a realization. It's like a slap in the face. Like, wait a minute, where am I? What are we doing? It kind of hits her, and you kind of see it. He kind of has her head tilting. He has his hand on her chin in the second panel, like he's examining her, and instead of getting mad, her body language is like her head's tilting, like she's going with it, and it isn't until the fourth panel where she has a realization of what's going on, and at this point her hands are down. Obviously, in the third panel, that chainmail's kind of hanging off her arms, and it's no longer hanging off the one arm, because you see it by the time we get to the fourth and the fifth panel, it's not even around her anymore. It's on that one arm. So it's a lot. So the dialogue kind of gives us the mood, and it's sort of like in a film where the film slows down for that moment between the two leads, and they have that moment together, and they look at each other's eyes. And when you, the viewer, are there, you're like caught in that moment. And I thought Barry did a beautiful job catching that moment between these characters, saying there's a possibility and they're attracted to each other, but the reality of why they're there has to come like a slap in the face, and they break it up, and then by the last panel, they're both getting out and talking about what they're going to do the rest of the day. So I loved the sequence when I was a kid because it so much the imagination. It was sort of like, man, I hope I meet a girl that I can get into a bar fight with and then run out and meet by a fountain. It like appealed to me on 1,000 levels, but also it was nice to see Conan being a guy, beyond just cutting people up and stealing stuff. He actually was having this really good moment with this girl, and also it established who Sonya was. Like, she was sexy, she was violent, she was all game to do things, but at the same time, she's business, and the
Mm.
business kicks in. So I thought these were great, beautifully rendered pages early in Barry's career, but they really sang to me. And when I was a kid, this book was like my keeper, and I still have it. So that gives you an idea. Since I was 12, I still have that copy, which is in horrible shape, but it's a great book.
So, for a last question, because it's Comic Art Live, I've got to ask: do you
Yeah,
own any Barry Windsor Smith original Conan art?
I do not. I have never been able to afford it. It's been expensive since I was a kid. I will say I hung out with Barry, and I talked to Barry, and so that itself is what a gift for me because not many people know Barry or have hung out with him or anything like that. But I was never able to afford any, and it's just one of those things. Sometimes with comic art, you can just admire it and not have to own it. I think whoever has these pages, they're lucky bastards. I love them for it. Um, but I feel like you shouldn't own everything you want. I think there's a problem there, and I've always just admired these. And I've had opportunities for one or two things, but they weren't pages that I was in love with. They were just nice pages, and I said for that kind of money, I mean, these pages right now would be like what 100,000 maybe because it's for Sonya, and like these would be so expensive. I like to have a car in the house. And I like to eat. Um, you know, Whoever owns these, I guarantee they're just sitting on them, and that's in their collection until they pass away or they decide that they want to, get some money and go traveling or something. But um, no, I don't own any Barry Smith, but I do own a lot of other stuff that I love, and um, and honestly, I can do one of these episodes a day for the rest of my life with you, as far as books, because when I had comics, I read them and I looked at them and I read them and I went back and I looked at each panel of the art and I looked at the lettering and I said, what's under the lettering? And like, I really dissected it. And I think that's probably how I learned to ink and draw was I looked at the things and then I looked at the storytelling really hard because, I wanted to be a writer as well. And I kept thinking, why did they do that? And why did they do this? And, I think part of being a good writer is watching a lot of films and looking at comics and dissecting them, and that's why I think this is a good show and why this is fun for me.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Jimmy. And for everybody watching, you can find more of Jimmy's work and what he's currently got going at paperfilms.com. Thanks again for talking Conan.
My pleasure, buddy.